I just finished my talk with Lecolion Washington. It was an incredible talk. So if you watch any of these cello circle talks, this is the one to watch so far. No offense to anyone else who I've talked to, but these are the questions that I've been trying to ask, and Lecolion not only speaks my language, so I don't have to explain myself so much. I just have to say something, and he gets what I was trying to say, and then took it to the next level. And he's a million steps ahead of me on whatever path I'm on, and I really, really appreciated the time that he gave me. I know Lecolion because I taught in the summer at this camp called Prism Ensemble Camp in Memphis, PRIZM, and he founded the I can't say that for some reason. Prism Ensemble, and Prism, the camp is supposed to reflect what Memphis looks like in terms of racial makeup, socioeconomic makeup, all of these things. And these kids come in, some of them are have had lessons for a long time, and some of them haven't, but are all really interested in music, classical music in particular. And it was a really powerful experience. And I had never ever been on a faculty that was as diverse as that faculty, and I'd never been a part of a camp that was as diverse as the student population, diverse on many levels. So I thought, this guy knows what he's doing. Like, this guy has set up something that was very powerful. And why is it that, at least in my world, that this is an anomaly? And that's sad to me. So in trying to do something about it, I thought, well, he's the one to talk to. So he had done a few things in Memphis, the Memphis Music Initiative, and this Prism Ensemble, among other things, University of Memphis. But now he's in Boston, doing great work in Boston. And so I will post a link to his bio in my Cello Circle website. But in the meantime, I hope you really enjoy this talk. I absolutely did. So I hope that those of you listening get something out of this too. So I know you because I don't know how much you know about me at all, but I know you because I went to work with the Prism Camp this summer, and that was my
Yeah.
first time working with that. And when I first got wind of it, just the fact that the percentages of kids at this camp reflect the percentages of kids in Memphis is like, I don't know why that should be earth shattering, but right? Like, that shouldn't be a thing. That I'm surprised about that. But I was, right? Because that's not okay. So I'm mostly in the Suzuki world. So
Mhm.
I'm coming to you for your opinions on a couple things. One, and I'm active on the national level in the Suzuki Association. So I'm
Yeah.
wondering, you probably know about the Suzuki Association. I'm wondering what your thoughts are about where we're going nationally. But mostly I'm here for selfish reasons, that as I've tried to figure out ways to help people that don't have the means that I have had in my life. I've tried to find a couple things. Like, I went to Africa and we tried to start a string program there, and like, if anything feels like colonialization, that totally did.
Yep.
But that, when I take that, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are, when I take that level of, like, I don't want to do that kind of colonialization, but even on a micro level, on my level, it's still, I don't know if I'm just getting in my head too much, really. And that's where I'm wondering if you could weigh in. I still feel like this kind of saviorism of, like, I'm going to bring you into my studio because this is going to be better for you, or classical music's going to be great for you, or I'm going to go into your community and teach because I have something to give. Like, I feel those things might be true, but I also feel like what might be true is this kind of saviorism mentality. And I wonder if you could help me kind of grapple with that dichotomy.
Yeah. There's a couple of things. I wrote a little editorial for the ensemble. I don't know if you happen to have a chance to read that.
No,
Uh,
I
I
didn't. I'll
can
look that
I can
up.
send you the link where I talk about.
That would be great.
I'll send you a link to the article where I do talk about the relationship between community engagement and colonization.
Okay, awesome.
And it gives just kind of some. It was really just my way of trying to articulate the way that many people think about engaging in communities. And my organization, we did I have these community conversations as well. And so I had a whole hour and a half long conversation about this very topic as well.
In what, where can I find that that
I'll send you the
subject?
link to that as well. I'll send you the link to the
Awesome.
article and to the conversation. Um, but as it relates to the work that folks are doing in communities, I think that it's automatically colonization when you come up with an idea and then ask another community to host it.
Yeah.
Right. So that's, to me, that's the first thing. And some good advice that I got many years ago was, if you want people to go to your stuff, you got to start by going to their stuff. And so if you're doing legitimate community engagement work, you're actually trying to spend a lot of time in a community that you want to work in and work with, just to learn. Um,
Yeah.
and not even in service of creating a partnership or a program, but just in service of learning and becoming a better community partner overall.
Right.
And good community partners are going to then end up with high quality community partnerships. So you end up taking a lot of meetings and you taking a lot of meetings that aren't necessarily going to end in a project. You end up going to a lot of events that aren't going to end in a project either.
Yeah.
But when that time comes, you're setting yourself up to be ready to be a legitimate community partner when you're called upon to be one.
Because
And
you're
so it's
actually in the
really a lot about
community.
giving the power to communities to decide for themselves what their community needs, not someone over here saying everyone in your community would probably benefit from violin lessons.
Right. That's the thing.
So
Yeah.
that's, to me, that's the first set of framing that's just wrong.
Yes. Yeah.
And the byproduct of that, I'd say what I have like a Jesse Jackson moment. I say, if you can't trust the root, you can't trust the fruit.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. No, absolutely.
Right.
Amen. Right.
And
I just
so, and so,
absolutely.
and so if,
He had a way
and
with boiling things down, didn't he?
yeah, right. Oh no, that's actually my statement. It just sounds like Jesse
Oh,
Jackson.
for real? Oh
Oh
my
yeah.
gosh, then you have a great way of boiling things down. Thank you for that, because I'm gonna take
uh,
that's gonna be that's good.
but
That's
it's true, right? And so, and a lot of the things are rooted in an idea that the communities that people are working in are lacking something.
yeah.
And the truth is, the communities are vibrant and beautiful, and they actually, many of them don't need anyone's outside influence or
Right.
outside involvement.
Right.
And beginning with that is the most, even a community does need your organization. If you're walking in, to your point, as some type of a savior by your presence, it's
Right.
already problematic. But if you're walking in, even if you're needed, if you're walking in saying, well, before I engage with this community, I have a lot I want to learn from you. And
Right.
so I'm going to invest my time, talents, and treasures in learning about your community and who the people are here long before I create a partnership with you. To me, that ends up landing with things that are more genuine, authentic, and sustainable.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the sustainability of it is one thing too, because I think a lot of, especially after the social things that were happening during this pandemic and awareness increases, but then everyone now is just kind of gone back to their lives now that it's not a pandemic and they're not faced with it. And it's kind of it's super frustrating because then I think a lot of people are thinking in the studio world, especially in the Suzuki studio world, well, I'm going to have one scholarship student in my studio. If we all have one scholarship student, then we can save the world. It's like, that's not a thing. That's just
Yeah,
not,
nah, bruh.
that's not a, yeah.
Right.
That is so,
Yeah.
yeah, I think even, so now, I mean, on a, think that just really boils things down very very easily, actually, the way that you put that. On a national level, then, for the Suzuki Association, I think there is a call from the membership to be more relevant, on like to a wider base rather than the upper and upper middle class, generally white and largely Asian population. And so I wonder if you think that, like, that's okay. Like, this is what your organization's doing. Do it, or do you think that it should? I mean, there needs to be an effort to widen our base, but at the same time, widening. I don't know what widening the base feels like on a national level without feeling like colonization.
Well, I mean, I guess the question is, why is there a need to widen the base? Like, start with why. Why is that necessary? What's the purpose of widening the base of folks who are engaged with Suzuki string playing, to use the topic at hand.
Yeah,
But,
I think, and as is only personally, that for a lot of, going through what we are now, a lot of people eyes are opening to just vast inequalities. So to try to mitigate that on the level that we can mitigate it, to make the so that equity looks different in our microcosm of a world, if we can make that look different, then maybe we can have an effect on a vast problem that is going to take more than what we're doing, obviously. But I don't know, do you throw money at something, or do you throw your time into something, or do you go and just try to be everywhere? Like, I think that what's happening is people are trying to being all things to everybody, and it's not working, and so then they're just giving up.
but again, the question goes back to who benefits, right? Like, to me, that is the most critical question. And I'll give you an example on the funding side. There were a lot of organizations that were viewed as bad actors, right? They were exclusionary. They may have engaged in some racist activity. They potentially had racist policies and practices within. Um, and what happened to those institutions as we went through this awakening is people then went and started to support them even more. So let's give them more money because to get them to do better,
Oh, I see what you mean.
right?
Yeah.
And then there were these institutions that were doing things really well who got no more money,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I see
right?
what you mean by who benefits. That
Who,
makes
so like you say, yeah. So when you're thinking about I mean, to me, the conversation it should roll back always to who benefits. So, for example, there are a lot of places that are engaging in community engagement work or inclusion work or racial equity work. But at the end of the day, the reason that they want to do that is because they want to sell tickets,
right.
right? It's like we want to have more people coming to our thing.
Right.
And for that reason, this thing is now important.
Right. Right.
And so at the end of the day, the real beneficiary is the institution,
Yeah. Yeah. I see what you mean.
right? And so then
Absolutely.
they're backing them, they're backtracking from there, back deconstructing from my benefit
Like a
to
trickle
what
down
do I
theory.
need, right? Yeah, well, and also it's not even trickle downs because there was really not much data being gathered on what the impact is on the people who go to those concerts. It's
Right.
just, did they go? See, trickle down economics says if certain individuals get
Right.
riches, then other people will get riches also, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so there's an actual impact that is meant to exist throughout the system.
Right.
In this conversation, actually, there is no interest in the impact of the folks who go to the concerts. Just, did they go? That was the impact. And at the end of that impact, the institution is the only thing that benefits. So anything where it's like having more students engaging in Suzuki lessons or bassoon playing, which is what I do, or anything else, if that is the end goal of the thing, it's automatically operating under some type of a deficit frame. And I think it becomes problematic.
I think that I'm going to try to speak on a more global scale, which is a little dangerous because I'm only one person. But with Suzuki lessons, I think a lot of there's this Suzuki philosophy
Mm-hmm.
of if we give every child a chance to do something, then they have the potential to get there, given time or resources, all that kind of thing. So I think that I think the idea is for these Suzuki lessons to really provide the framework for if we can get the entry in, then all of these kids of any ilk, of any background, can come in and find what feels like a kind of potential for reaching any goal, just to open up that potential. And I wonder if that already is that same problem because, well, if those kids didn't they have that in their own community, Are we deciding that they don't have it in the community, but maybe they don't have it in their community, right? So that's the thing, that people are like, well, if racism weren't a problem in this country, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. So then, well, when I want to go about doing something about it, that's also problematic because of the racist institutions that are in place.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things in there, and again, this is I'm not saying that things are right or wrong right now because I'm still learning so much, and I think that in the past I might have done that, and so I'm trying to be thoughtful about that more often. But I think there are some things that should be interrogated and deconstructed, right, and maybe even potentially reconstructed, or maybe deconstructed and remaining in only its component
And just
parts.
right, and letting things emerge
Right.
even.
But when we think about a lot of, I look at, and I'll take this from the perspective of bassoon playing. Um, Bassoon playing, there's a very tried and true, well known pedagogy that people follow. There's like a bunch of the same etude books, same repertoire, and everyone is using some version of it, right? Much like not to the same degree of training as you would need for Suzuki training, but it does follow this basic system, right?
Right.
And that basic system has in many ways, a very specific goal in mind, right? And it is specifically around playing Western European art music.
Right.
Like that's its intent,
Right. Right.
right? It doesn't necessarily leave much space for things. It messes up the system a little bit when you start
When you
plugging
start
in
back,
things
yeah.
that are not
Yeah.
Western European art music, right?
Yes.
People are like, "Oh, I don't know if the system can compute that, so take it out."
Right. 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 Yeah.
But
It
the
does not
system
compute. It's
works.
just like,
Yeah, it does
yes.
not compute, right? And so
Yeah.
you plug that into the machine kicks it back out,
Right.
right? And I don't know enough about Suzuki to know that's the case, but my son did a little bit of it, and there is because again it is very systematized. Oftentimes, systematized things don't allow for other cultures to be embedded in them. And remember, in our field, when we're trying to get money from foundations, folks are supporting arts and culture, right? Like that is what it is. And so
Yeah.
then it's like it's actually not supporting arts and culture. It's actually supporting a specific art and
Mm-hmm.
a specific culture.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so if people are very interested in learning about the components of that specific
Mm.
culture,
Yeah.
then this is a wonderful pathway to that. But
Right.
the idea that it is music we're just learning about music is actually untrue.
Right.
It's actually learning music from a very unique and specific perspective,
Yeah. Yeah.
and with a very specific artistic practice in mind at the end. And so
Right.
to not name that, or worse, is to say, well, that is the best music. That's the greatest music in the history of humankind.
Which is how
And
some
so we
people
should be
function.
learning that, which is actually a worse statement,
Right.
because it excludes all of the other cultures in the world and their music,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
But I mean, just naming that is cool. Just name it, right? Just name that. Actually, this is specifically training designed and designated and created to promote this particular type of music.
Yeah. Yes. One of the things I came to yesterday while talking to a friend is, in infant care, they say, well, your child is born a complete human being, and if you treat the child that way, your child rearing changes, and that's so true. And I suddenly put together, this is the way I'm trying to there's a lot of like deconstructing going on for that, even just for parenting my daughter, because
Mm-hmm.
we're not raised to believe that infants are human beings, but we're also not trained to believe that the kid that comes in the door is a complete musician before they start lessons, because
Right,
they have musical
right.
opinions, they know what they like, they know what's out there in their world. It's just not what we have in our world. And then it's me. So one of the things that I came to, and I wonder if you could help me with this too, is in order to get away from the repertoire problem, especially in the Suzuki Association, because it's so repertoire centered, the problem with the racism in classical music is this repertoire track. I feel like it's a really big problem. So I started teaching more towards concepts of playing. But in order to teach these concepts, it's kind of in order to, like, we're born to speak, and no matter how, if you're born physically normative, it doesn't matter. You're going to learn to speak. We don't have to teach you. And if you say the word wrong, you're not going to like give your tongue some kind of muscle problem.
Hmm.
But if we do something wrong on the cello, we could really seriously injure ourselves if we do it over a long period of time. So I think a lot what happens in a lot of teaching is we get into the point of I don't want you to injure yourself, so I'm going to tell you what to do, which I think needs to happen. And I thought maybe there's a way to get around that. I think that just needs to happen
Hmm.
for a serious student
Yep.
or even a mildly serious student. But then at some point, there has to be a point where the teacher lets go of their vision for what needs to happen technically on the instrument and lets the student take over. I think that's where the rub happens really is in teachers don't let go early enough, just like most parents don't let go early enough.
Yep.
But I wonder if you have a context for that in a kind of oppression context. You know what I mean? Because I do feel like there's an oppression that happens when I try to tell my students, you need to play this way so you don't injure yourself. Yeah, that's oppressive, but it's for your own good. Like I'm gonna pull my child out of the street if she's about to get hit from a car. Absolutely,
Yep.
I'm oppressing you happily. But at what point, like, how do we grapple with that letting go, and where does that happen?
Well, I think it's more, to me, it's not necessarily just a developmental thing, right? So, when you think about infants, as much as we've all been parents and put the Cheerios on the little table so the baby can learn how to use the pinchers, right?
Right, right.
Right. And that is something that they're learning on their own. They have some autonomy in learning how to use their pinchers.
Yeah.
One of our kids, I think it was our oldest kid, he didn't know how to crawl. He crawled backwards. And so he would,
My daughter started that way too.
he didn't know, he didn't
She'd
crawl
end up
forward.
under the couch.
He crawled backwards. He was like, okay,
Oh, on purpose. I love it. Oh
yeah,
God,
what was all he
yes.
knew how to do? He's like, okay, it's back here. If I just slide a little bit,
God, it's
and
awesome.
so, um, and that's one of those things where, I would think that, to your point, when something is dangerous, I think that's of course a place where you come in. So someone's going to physically injure themselves. I think that it does make sense to have some understanding about that. But what I would also say, if your child is walking, you're pulling your child away from the street. You don't ever take your child away from roads and say, okay, you can never be around a road again. So the
Right.
barrier that we're putting on you is that you can never be around that thing again,
Right,
right?
right, right. Yeah.
We do give them this a little bit of autonomy around trial and error. Right. And so we're not trying to control every move that the individual makes. We're just trying to, at the end of the day, ensure their safety.
Right, right.
Right. And so from an oppression perspective, that's also the goal is we're just trying to ensure the safety. And
Yeah.
if you've been in many musical training programs, they don't ensure people's mental, emotional, and psychological safety.
Yes, yes.
Right.
You
And
mean like cats.
some of it has to do with the fact that the system functions as overseers to individuals and how in the ways in which they move in the world.
Right,
And so
right.
the oppression is kind of built into that model.
Yeah,
And I speak for myself, having been someone who was a college professor. I taught at the University of Memphis for 13 years,
yeah.
and I was a person who, in my own teaching practice, promoted some of the practices that I'm now, in many ways, raging against.
Yeah.
And so I would never state that I have done these things perfectly and that therefore I have the right to then speak on it. I've
Right.
actually done them exactly the same way that everyone else has done them.
That's the thing. And that's what we're trained to do in
Right.
classical music because that's considered making it. When you
Right.
can do what your teacher did the way they did it. Good
Right.
job.
Right. But if also I would say that if I have engaged in some things that were wrong, I do have a responsibility to name that they were wrong.
Right. Oh,
Right. And
absolutely.
then try to do differently in the future. And
Yeah.
so now when I think about teaching and being a teacher, I do think about it quite differently than I did when I was a college professor, for sure.
How would you put that? Could you say that? Give your elevator pitch for that?
Well, I think that I would say that the idea of the standard repertoire is problematic. Now, one of
Yes.
the things I started doing at the end of my time was I would let students go. I would let students pick the repertoire for their recitals.
Yeah.
But what I started doing near the end was I asked students to select a piece that was meaningful to them based on their identity, like how they thought about themselves. So they could, if a woman could play a piece by a woman composer, a black student could play a piece by a black
I
composer,
see.
a person could play a piece by a trans composer.
Yeah.
But just something that you're like, or if they're from Appalachia, they could play a piece by an Appalachian composer, but just something that they felt like spoke to who they were as an individual.
So would you help them select the piece? Because
No,
the other thing is, my students come to me, they say, I don't know what I don't know, and I know you know more. So I want you to tell me to do things. And
right.
that's the problem. Is like, well, I'm not in the practice of telling you to do things anymore. Like I've switched, and now you have to figure this out. Like this is messy. This is going to be messy,
The
but I don't
best
want to tell you what
thing
to do.
the majority the thing that I have done, I did this in a workshop one time when people were talking about repertoire and how do we pick, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, I'm sitting on the screen and I went to Google and I Googled, Native American composers, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And and then I was like, okay, well, let's do some work, right?
Yes.
And to the point about my students and their recitals, 100% of the time, the best piece that they played on their recital was the one that they selected for themselves, that
Of
one that spoke to their
course.
identity,
Of
right?
course.
And so, if we're talking about trying to make the highest quality musicians,
Yeah.
always, and in my lived experience, the people played their best when they were playing these works that spoke to them on one level or another.
Right.
Then, what are we talking about if we're talking about trying to build excellence?
Right.
We can't remove the idea of relevance from excellence.
Yeah. That's
And
good.
so I
That's
would
good too.
say if I my elevator pitch would be to either to rethink or even abandon the idea of the standard repertoire
Yeah.
and forcing those of us in power to learn how to hear better.
Yeah.
Those of us in power are the ones who are deficient, not those who don't have the power. We're the ones who are like,
Right.
I can only hear how good you are if you're playing the Tchaikovsky violin concerto.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I
Absolutely.
don't hear you playing that, I can't tell whether or not you are a quality musician technically and artistic.
Right. Right. That's our problem. That's our
Right. Yeah,
ears.
right. That is the thing. So my elevator pitch is to rethink that overall completely.
Yeah. And
And
then
then
how do you frame that in a classroom setting then?
well, I think that it comes with actually listening and asking questions and having a bi-directional relationship with
Bi-directional, like,
students. Like
yeah.
it begins there, and having an asset-based relationship where you believe that the students have something to offer you.
Right.
So you have something to learn from them, and you're actually spending your energy trying to find out what you have to learn from them.
Right. Yeah.
And then they'll spend their energy maybe finding out what they have to learn from you.
That's so funny. I feel like I do that in conversation with my students in their lives, but then it hasn't happened yet with music. Like I haven't figured out how to, because I see them as whole people, but not whole musicians. Like when I just came to that yesterday, I was like, that's going to be really helpful. I'm going to have to, this is
Yeah,
so huge for me. Thank you so much for this
and
talk.
no worries. And I think that the other thing is, so when I read this book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed.
Okay.
It's a great book because the first two-thirds of it, he's really just by a Brazilian writer. But the first two-thirds of it is just him talking about the nature of oppression and how it just kind of plays itself out in the world. I loved it for that reason.
Yeah.
And people who have been in oppressive systems, uh, they only in many ways know how to navigate oppressive systems. So they have to
Right.
be, and they will move to like toward oppressive systems as well. And so oftentimes the young folks have to be taught how to exist in a system that doesn't oppress them.
Well, that's the thing. Like, as I homeschool, right? So I have strong feelings about school as an oppressive entity.
Hmm.
So, like, that creates kids who think that's what needs to happen. Like, you need to be told when to sit, you need to be told when to take a poop, you need to be told when to drink your water, or even stretch, or even ask a question, or what to value, or what to learn, or how good you're doing, how well you're doing. Like, that's up to someone else. And then they grow to make systems for other people. And we wonder why our system is oppression.
Right. Yeah. And so, again, trying to interrogate that a little bit. And so many people when I talk about music making, and I've fallen into this myself even actually, but so many people when I talk about music making, and they're not professional musicians, they took lessons when they were a kid. To a person, they've said they love music, but they were like, I just wasn't good enough, so I quit.
Right?
It's like I love music. I really enjoyed it, but I just, I was just never going to be good enough, so I quit.
I just like, that
And
kills
it's
me.
like, and that's because that's how they were taught. That's what they
Right.
were taught. That was what they were. The only reason to engage in the musical practice
Is
is
to
if you're
successfully
really,
perform in a
really,
certain
really, really
way.
good at
Yeah.
the thing. If you're not good at that thing, you shouldn't be anywhere near it.
And good by someone else's measurement, too.
Right. And so like that system is again, I think problematic. Now, I don't think that every amateur musician should be. I don't think amateur musicians should be playing in the Boston Symphony, right? you
Right.
know,
Right.
right? I understand some of those things, although there's conversation to be had about that as well. But I understand that, and I also believe that no 17-year-old should feel like they're not good enough.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Like I having a 16-year-old son myself,
Yeah.
no 14-year-old kid or 12-year-old kid
Right.
be walking out of a lesson being like, I'm not good enough. I want to quit.
Right.
Like
I
somebody should be there to catch them and say, that's not what we're doing here.
absolutely.
Maybe that's not what we're doing with you. Maybe we're going to come here and we're just going to play a little bit. This
Yeah.
is, you don't have to practice. You can
Right.
come and spend an hour with me or 30 minutes or whatever and just engaging in the love of music making,
Right. Right. Right.
right? Because when we validate the fact that they're not good enough and they should quit, we then become complicit in the problem.
Right. Oh, this is great. I guess I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I do have one more question for
Yeah,
you.
please.
So I do travel a lot, and I wonder, are there places that are doing a good job of? I don't even know what I'm asking. Are there places I should visit? You know me a little bit now. I want to
Yeah.
see people teaching and doing a good job of whatever they're doing. And are there programs that you just would love to highlight for me?
Yeah. I mean, Play on Philly is doing great work with Stan Thompson. Project 440 also.
So Stanford and I went to the same place in Meru, Kenya. Like we
Oh,
came.
okay.
It's so
Yeah.
funny. So I know him.
Yeah, Play on Philly, great work there. I think there's some Project 440 as well. In Tempo, which I think is in Connecticut. They're doing some good stuff. Community Music Works.
That's where you are.
Oh, it's up here, yeah, in
Yeah.
this area. I think that a lot of the work that Sphinx is doing, of course, everyone knows Sphinx, but SPA and their academies, Yola, they're doing some really cool things as well. Um, there's Harmony Project. There's the one in Los Angeles and the one in Phoenix. They're
Oh.
not actually connected to each other, I don't think,
Oh.
but
Oh. I see.
but I do know of the two. Those are some that just kind of come right off the top of my head.
Awesome.
Of course, the Prism Ensemble.
Yeah. Yeah. I
The
was.
Memphis Music Initiative, though.
That was
In
another
my,
thing. Like, oh, that's after. Well, I would be like, well, this is a great idea. Like, who started this? Or like Lecolion. And who started this? Lecolion. I was like, I sounds like I just need to talk to Lecolion, Washington. Like,
Well, I wasn't the brainchild behind the Memphis Music Initiative. I was given three bullets of things to accomplish
oh, interesting.
in the Memphis Music Initiative, and we turned those three bullets into the thing that it became.
I see. What
So
were
it
the three
was.
bullets?
I think one of them was. think one of them was engaging professional musicians in Memphis in youth work. And then the other one was partnering with schools and school systems to engage in school programming, something like that. And oh, and the third one was something around creating opportunities for young people to understand the richness of Memphis's rich cultural history, something like that.
Ah,
And so we had the school program where we had professional musicians who were working in schools as teaching artists.
yeah.
And as a component of our relationships with the schools at the time, I don't know if they still do these things now, but as a component of the relationship, each school got 2 field trips every year. And so folks got an
Oh,
opportunity to go to places in Memphis like, the Stax Museum, the Rock and
yeah,
Soul Museum,
right.
going to Memphis Symphony concerts and things like that, Iris Orchestra concerts. So um, folks got a chance to go and experience music.
So the
And
funding, all the funding that you got kind of was funneled into those kind of three
mhm.
categories.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And so it was, and so again, I would be the last one to say that that was all me, because we had a great team at the time,
Awesome.
and I just happened to be leading that particular program.
How
And
many people were leading that team? I'm curious how many people were going to
well,
be part of that.
so on the pilot, it was just me and a guy named Duron Hall. It was just the two of
Just
us
two of you.
who did the pilot. I was doing a lot of the strategy work and the relations with schools. Duran was doing the teaching artist work and a lot of the operational things.
I see.
And then after the pilot year, we then hired. I hired two fellowship coaches is what we call them, but they were the ones who managed the teaching artists because we like doubled from the pilot. We
I
went
see.
from 10 to 20 in a year,
Wow.
which
Wow.
meant it was more schools, and so I just needed was going to need a lot more support. So
Yeah.
we hired two teaching artists, and then this is still while I was teaching at the University of Memphis, and I was on a sabbatical at the
Oh, you were
time.
busy. I was going to say, how did you do all
Yeah.
that?
Well, I was on sabbatical that the year that we launched, and then the next year, the executive director Darren Isom, he was like, "Hey, we want to keep you on to continue
I
leading this
see.
program," and I was like, "Well, there's a lot of things managing the day to day that I'm not going to be able to do," and he's like, "Well, let's hire some more folks onto your team."
I see.
So we hired two more positions who
Wow.
were the fellowship coaches reported to one person, and then there was another person who was in charge of partnerships.
And that worked out. That system worked out for you.
It did work out. It worked out quite well.
And then would you have like monthly meetings where you were involved?
Actually, I went in. I went in every week. So I
Oh,
went
I
in
see.
a couple, 3 days a week, maybe.
Oh, I see. Oh, you're there a lot still.
And so when I was teaching at the university, I would do my work there. And then I would leave from the University of Memphis, and then go over and do this work with the Memphis Music Initiative, which was great because I mean it was impacting 3,000 students at the
Yeah.
time,
Right.
every week in
Yeah.
Memphis.
Yeah.
And so it was a pretty significant time.
Yeah.
And actually, the year that I went back to, I think it was even more than that. The year that I went back to the university, we added 10 more teaching artists. So that year was
On
30.
top of that.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing.
So it was a big, and so we added 3 positions that year. That's right. We added another fellowship coach to manage the incoming 10.
Yeah.
We had a man and 2 managers, I think, something like
And
that.
did you train the teachers that you were overseeing?
We did as part of their contract with the Memphis Music Initiative. They had to participate in monthly professional developments.
Oh, gosh, I could speak to you for hours. I just like
So
what
once
that would
we,
look like.
yeah, it was great. And well, it was good because the first year we created the PDs for them, and then I'm not mistaken, excuse me, if I'm not mistaken, we started asking folks what were the
What
things they
they
wanted
need.
to learn more about.
Oh, cool.
And so then we added those things into,
Oh,
so we
that's
had like a
wonderful.
2 day long, or maybe it was even longer than that. We had an orientation when folks first joined at the beginning of the year,
Yeah.
and it was for everyone. And then we had, uh, and then we had these monthly PDs where everyone had to come.
Great. Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, this is so helpful. I just can't thank you enough, really, so much.
No, no problem. I hope it's helpful. Hopefully this will be usable to you in some way or another.
It's absolutely usable to you. Yeah,
Listen
this
to
is
me
really.
rant for 45 minutes, but
It's no, no, I love it. This is what I want. It's exactly what I wanted out of this.
okay, good, good. I'm
All right.
glad. I'm glad. All right.
All right,
Well,
great. Thank you
again,
so
feel free to stay
much.
in touch and good luck and
Thank you.
keep me posted if you come up with anything you're going to put into practice.
Yeah, great. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Lecolion.
No problem.
All
Thank
right,
you.
take
Take
care.
care. Bye-bye.